Hello, and welcome to this special TMS-focused Treasury cast. I'm Tom Alford, Deputy Editor of TMI, and I'm delighted to be joined in this session by Matthias Varenkamp, who is an account executive at Cobase. Matthias is here to offer his view on what we might call the democratisation of the TMS. Hello, and welcome, Matthias.
Hi, Tom. Thank you for having me on this podcast. Really glad that we can talk today and looking forward to it.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Okay, so what do we mean by democratisation in this context? I think in essence it should be about opening up TMS ownership to firms that for various reasons may feel it's not meant for them. So before we dive in, let's first quickly set the scene. Matthias, we both know that the broad arguments for upgrading treasury processes and technologies, and also that the TMS is perhaps one of the most effective means of tightening up operations. But what would you say to treasurers who feel they are either doing perhaps an okay job as they are without one, or even secretly know they are perhaps just about getting away with it, but have no sight of a TMS on the horizon?
Yeah, thank you, Tom. I would say this is very honestly, most treasuries look fine on a normal day. Payments go out, reports are made, nobody complains. But real problems show up when something changes, an acquisition, a fraud attempt, a new country, a key person leaving, or a liquidity shock. If your processes live in Excel or emails and people's head, then you're fine until you're not. When someone tells me, yeah, we're doing okay, or we're just about getting away with it, yeah, we're relying on manual work and heroics. That's risky, in my opinion. It doesn't scale, and it's hard to defend to auditors, banks, or investors. A TMS is not about fixing a disaster. It's about taking something that kind of works today and making it robust, controlled, and ready for the future.
Okay, so while many firms might actually genuinely believe their treasury functions that already have suitable technology in the form of perhaps accounting software or even Excel, as you just mentioned, what do you think might convince them that a TMS really is better than these non-treasury specific systems?
First of all, Excel and ERP systems are great, but they were not built to run treasury. Excel is flexible, but it's manual, it's easy to break, and there is no real audit trail. On the other hand, ERP and accounting software are focused on booking and reporting transactions, not really maybe on a local level on bank connectivity. Payment security, cash visibility, and risks are also no big topics within ERPs and accounting softwares. So in Treasury, I believe you need things like automated bank connections, standard payment formats, clear approval flows, and real-time or near real-time cash views. I think most important of all, proper control over who can do what. You can try to build that with, for instance, spreadsheets or via email, but then you essentially end up with patchwork. So a TMS is really built around Treasury's daily work. So it gives you one place for all your cash, all your payments, all your risk management, and all your controls. So the big win is not just the functions, but mainly it's less manual work, less risk, and a cleaner and more professional setup.
Very valid point. So building on that then, perhaps you could just reveal some of the more impressive opportunities available to those who do actually use a TMS and perhaps explain why the sort of outcomes that these people are achieving are beneficial not just to Treasury, but also to the business as a whole. I mean, what are treasurers getting out of using a TMS that you've seen that is really quite impressive?
TMS changes the job of the Treasury department or the treasurer by enabling them to spend less time on collecting and moving data and more time on making the strategic decisions that essentially move the business forward. So for the treasurer and the treasury department, you get better visibility. So you have one view of all your cash positions. You are able to create a clearer forecast. You are able to standardize your payment processing. Also, essentially, you reduce your key person exposure and eliminating the risk of relying on that one person within the business, maybe the treasurer or someone else that knows how the spreadsheet operates, that knows all the macros, etc. If that person leaves, you lose all that knowledge. And a TMS essentially gives you that knowledge readily available and makes it future-proof. So also for the wider business, it means that you can make better use of the cash, but also of credit lines. So you have fewer surprises. You have a quicker answer for the management. You have a strong control environment. And also finally, your CFO can rely on the numbers that you provide them. So essentially, it's not just a nicer tool. I think it improves how the whole company manages cash, risk, and banking activities.
Yeah, well, I'd imagine any treasurer listening to this would probably expect some sort of evidence to that effect that they can actually achieve greater things with it. So, I mean, perhaps you could take a moment to offer up some notable TMS success stories from your client base. You don't have to mention names, of course, but I mean, are there any sort of things of the work you've done so far that you could pinpoint and say, this is an example of what you could be doing with a TMS?
It can differentiate the reasons why companies need a TMS or what is the most pressing issue to them. But I think there are some key things that all of them face. So as one example, typically a treasury looks into the back mirror. They look to the positions and their cash of the previous day. And the ability to build that sometimes takes them all morning to be able to see where was my cash yesterday, what were my positions yesterday, etc. With a tool such as Cobase, you come in and essentially all the data is there. And you can finally start forward looking and operate instead of spending your whole morning on collecting and moving the data. On the other hand, there is also this part is risk control. So another client of mine, for instance, they had over 150 people with access to banking portals with a lot of banks. And essentially many of those people, their only job was to upload payment files into the banking portals. But of course, every banking portal brings along their own user management, their own approval flows. And of course, with so many people needing access to different banking portals, you also have quite some people joining and leaving the company who all need access to the banking portals. You may need to make sure that they do not have too much or too little access. And with some banks, even the onboarding of a new user to a banking platform can be quite cumbersome. So also there a TMS where you can standardize these processes, maybe even leave out all those employees. You not necessarily need to give them access anymore to the TMS by connecting your ERP system to the system for automated upload of payments and download of statements. And you unify your whole user and approval management within your TMS. So those are essentially already two key benefits that I see with customers of mine and that are really the starting point of why you should have a TMS.
Right. So, I mean, clearly there's a whole host of tools there that can and indeed do in the real world make treasurers happy about the processes that they're undertaking on behalf of the business. But at the introduction, we talked about the democratisation of the TMS. And so I think we're suggesting that the TMS is no longer just for big corporates on their big budgets, but also for smaller firms, perhaps with restricted resources. So let's just move it on a bit then and set the scene once more, Matthias. Perhaps briefly talk me through modern system delivery and connectivity models that might suit the smaller business. This is doesn't have to be some monolith. This can be something that is appropriate to all sizes of operation.
The old TMS image is a big on-premise system, long projects, big IT involvement, and a very high budget. But I believe that that's not the reality anymore. Most modern TMS platforms are cloud-based, so truly cloud-based, born in the cloud, multi-tenant. So you log in via browser, the vendor hosts the systems, does the updates, and looks after security. So you don't need to run servers or maintain software yourself. And on top of that, connectivity is more standard. Instead of building custom links to each bank yourself, you connect once to the Cobase platform that already has many banks and formats in place. And for instance, now also a big move towards APIs and ready-made connectors that we have available with banks that also help a lot. And from that essence, smaller firms can now get a serious treasury tool without needing big corporate money or big corporate IT departments. So essentially, we take all those aspects away from you and we fully manage it for you.
Okay, so I mean, clearly there's a lot of functionality that's available to the smaller business, but they don't have to use it all at once. And there's limited sort of IT involvement required, really. I mean, but how would you respond to the treasurer who can, through that, see the logic of deploying a TMS, but feels perhaps held back by the prospect of trying to actually implement it, and then manage from the outset what they might perceive to be a heavyweight system? So, I mean, how best might they approach TMS project is what I'm saying. I mean, how would you sort of assuage their fears?
I would say don't think of it as one huge project. Think of it as a series of small controlled steps that you take. So also with Cobase, you don't turn on every feature on day one. So start with your biggest pain. Often that's cash visibility and payments. So get that live, stabilize it, and let people see the benefit within the company. Then, quite naturally, you can add the additional treasury modules. So, for instance, for cash flow and liquidity forecasting, for FX trading and hedging, for intercompany loan administration, in-house banking, for cash pooling. So, whatever makes sense for your situation, but take it step by step. And if you choose a vendor with standard templates, such as we have, and standardized integrations, you're also not designing everything from scratch. That also keeps the project much lighter and more manageable, especially for a smaller treasury team.
Right. So, yeah, as you say, start small and head straight for some quick wins there. So, sound advice. But I mean, having already explained system delivery and connectivity models, how feasible is it for a reasonably tech-minded treasurer to take on a TMS project themselves? Could they actually tackle this, or are there any concerns around this aspect?
I think with the solution as Cobase, it's very straightforward because you don't need extensive coding knowledge. You don't need to customize things as such. So everything is readily available for you. Even a not tech-savvy treasurer, it's very intuitive to work with. Everything is quite straightforward, and we will guide you through every step in the process. And we will fully train you and your team till you feel comfortable working with the tool. And I think also with a modern TMS, everything should be just very straightforward to work with because we try to template everything as much as possible. So the times of needing to have a big tech background or needing a lot of external consultants or running this big projects with your IT to get it all customized, that no longer applies for modern TMS such as Cobase.
Right. So, I mean, it's not only feasible for a reasonably tech-minded treasurer to take on a TMS project themselves, but also it's for everyone else, every normal person out there, that you don't have to be fully cognizant of all the technical aspects of it because help is available. So that's for the less techie people, even for the overstretched treasurer who simply hasn't got the time to even think about this, the guidance, initial planning, needs assessment, system setup, configuration, training, testing, whatever. That all can be done, or at least they can be guided through that by yourselves there then.
In my opinion, a good TMS vendor should guide you, especially if you're not technical or your team is small or resources are already stretched. So all of it starts with planning. So mapping your banks, your entities, your accounts, your payment flows, and also areas of risk within the company. Then also, together with the vendor, you should be able to design user roles and approvals together. So quite important, I think, and which is where we really try to make a difference compared to others. We try to do all the heavy lifting for our customers. So we try to take as much away from them as possible. We have weekly check-ins. We always keep them updated, but essentially we try to do the hard and all the technical work for them. And what I think is also very often neglected is during implementation, you should get help with the setup. with the testing and also with proper training. And also training should be practical. So it should be, this is how you do your day-to-day job in the system and not just the theory behind it. So maybe equal important after go live, you should have access to support, but also a dedicated person who knows your use case, who knows how you want to operate the system, who can help you improve the setup over time, but also make sure that you really get everything out of your setup. And for smaller businesses, I think essentially that type of support is often just as important as the software itself.
Right. Okay. So clearly the help is there if you need it, but I presume you would say that, any treasurer is working towards implementing a TMS, but do pay attention, do get involved, do look at it, because at some point, you may wish to change things and have a more technical conversation with your vendor here on what it is that the system is doing.
Yes. And I think typically those conversations that we have with customers are also a kind of consultancy that we deliver.
Right.
Because we deliver these solutions for many different customers, but also very similar customers to the businesses that we roll it out new. So we can advise them on things that they need to change, for instance, internally to achieve better results, so to say. So it's always a two-stream conversation. And I think also guidance on how you can optimize your treasury function and also learn from how others in the business have done it. So you're not only buying technology, you're also buying expertise, guidance, and also a soundboard, so to say, especially for many treasury departments that maybe only exist out of one person or just a couple of persons. We see the need for them also to check with others if the things that they are doing are right and what they could improve.
Right. Indeed. Well, that sort of level of feedback is something you're never going to get from Excel spreadsheet manufacturers thereof. So I guess there's another argument there for at least thinking about the TMS. But aside from not believing they're sufficiently big or complex to warrant a TMS, the elephant in the smaller company treasury room is usually its cost. I know it's perhaps a sensitive topic with vendors, but maybe you can tell me what treasurers might reasonably expect to be paying and what they should be asking about how TMS charges are applied. Are you okay to reveal some truths there?
I think cost is a real concern and it needs to be addressed directly. So today, many TMS solutions ask subscription fees, but also one-off implementation fees. And also there, I believe we at Cobase try to approach this differently. So with Cobase, for example, you only start paying license fees and one-off fees when you are live. So you have no upfront costs, no upfront investments. So you're not paying for something you cannot use yet. But next to that, I think you should also always compare the cost of a TMS with the cost of your business as usual. So all the manual time you're spending, the effort to maintain multiple banking portals, maybe even multiple banking channels, all the extra fees that you might be paying for it as well, and also the potential impact if fraud occurs within the company or a big error takes place. So when you add all of that up, I think a TMS looks much more reasonable than it did. And also, I think often something neglected, many treasurers are looking for this big bang, this big project with big budget. You can also just start by managing costs by starting with a smaller scope. So start with a few banks, a few entities, a few accounts, and run your core processes in the TMS. Prove the value to the business and then expand. So that spreads both the spend and also the internal effort.
Okay, so another challenge for treasurers is building a persuasive business case for a TMS because they've got many competing demands. Let's face it, And of course, that's especially true for the smaller business. So what's your advice to potential TMS users on developing a strong business case? I don't know if you can perhaps sum up any real life business cases that you've seen that have worked well at this point.
So when you're in a smaller company, you can't hide behind big fake arguments. You have to be very concrete. So especially if you want budget. So I would start really simple. So how many hours do people spend on a daily basis on cash positioning, on preparing payments, on logging into different banking portals, on fixing error and doing reconciliations? On top of that, how often are your cash forecasts late or off? And what does that do to funding decisions? So, do you borrow when you wouldn't need to or hold too much cash just in case? Then you show the after picture with the TMS. So, instead of 5 bank portals, one place to work. So, less manual typing, more automation, faster month-end closing, a cleaner forecast, fewer bank accounts, and usually also better terms with your banks because you have your house in order. Most of our clients build the case in just a few clear drivers. So cutting manual work, using their cash in a better way, and also they need to rely less on expensive short-term borrowing. So one mid-market client basically paid back the TMS in the first year just through time saved and lower funding costs. So that kind of simple numeric stories, this is what we spend today and this is what we save tomorrow. I think those stories are the ones that convince CFOs and owners of a company.
Yeah, that's sound advice, really. But it would be fair to say that not all TMSs are equal. But of course, no business can afford to make mistakes in selection. Just re-implementing it's just not going to happen. So, what questions should smaller firms in particular be asking potential vendors to ensure that long-term platform suitability? And within that, I think we might be able to cover there technically and indeed contractually being able to extract themselves from an arrangement. How would you respond to that?
I think smaller firms cannot afford a wrong choice. So the question should be very practical. So ask the vendor, how fast can you get a company like ours live? Give me a realistic scope. And also provide me with examples. On top of that, prove their knowledge. So how exactly does the bank connectivity work? Next question, who maintains it? Evenly important, what happens if anything changes? A format changes, or what happens if we add a new bank or account? Are there additional costs associated with that? Maybe something else also, how to maintain the platform. Can we change configurations ourselves? Or do we need to depend on the vendor all the time or even external consultants? And also, what does that cost and how long does it take? And I think I also mentioned it before, the support after go live. So who do we call when something isn't working? Who do I reach out to when I want to improve the setup? Those are equally important. And maybe one thing that in current times is very important, also security. And who owns the data? What happens to my data? Who has access to my data? What kind of security and controls do you have in place? And also, where is my data hosted? All of these should also be answered by vendors with concise frameworks, with audits, with all kind of certifications. Think of ISO 27001 or ISAI 3402 or SOC 2 Type 2. Ask for that to your vendors to make sure your data is secure.
To conclude our notion of what we said was democratization of a TMS, Matthias, perhaps I can ask you to sum up your thoughts on why TMS are so much more accessible and controllable today, even for the smaller businesses.
I think there are 3 big reasons. So first of all, technology is lighter. Cloud-based solutions, APIs, and shared connectivity means that you do not need big hardware projects or fully custom links to each bank. Second, delivery has changed. I think software as a service and standardized implementations means shorter projects, faster value, and also less dependency on IT budgets. Third, I think the mindset has moved. So vendors now build with mid-markets and smaller firms in mind, so not just global giants. Treasurers are also more open to leading tech projects and pushing for practical phased approaches. Put this all together, and the TMS is no longer a luxury of the very big. So in many cases, especially with growing complexity, not having a TMS is now the bigger risk. So even for smaller businesses.
So there you have it. That's a pretty compelling view on the democratization of TMSs from Matthias Varenkamp, who's account executive at Cobase. Thanks, Matthias, for explaining how even smaller firms, despite what they may think, really can access the power of the TMS. Thanks also to everyone listening. We hope you've enjoyed this TMS-focused edition of Treasury Cast.